Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newest Trusty's Vintage Deep Dive. Been a little while since I've had one of these, solely based on scheduling. I cranked so many through last year in the middle of while everyone else had nothing else to do. So there were plenty of people that were available to do deep dives. And now that things are starting to open back up, schedules are becoming more complicated, and took us a little bit of time to lock down my next guest, which some of you more attentive viewers, if you're familiar with my channel, both Instagram and YouTube, might recognize Holli when I did a complete surprise visit to her store. She did not know I was coming, and we ended up doing a half-an-hour video that first went live on Instagram, and then I pulled some clips of it and put it into my Vintage Maryland video that was on YouTube. So if you follow any of my channels, either of those, you might recognize Holli. Just trying to decide if you changed your hair. If you cut your hair, maybe
no,
not.
It's just been done. I've been wearing my hair basically the same way every day for a year and a half.
Oh, okay. No, there's good about consistency. So we do have Holli here from Suffragette City Vintage, which is located in Hyattsville, Maryland. Is that correct?
Yep.
And Hyattsville it's a suburb of DC. I'm trying to remember. You're like, is it northeast, east?
Yeah, we're like a mile and a half, 2 miles north of the DC line. If you take Rhode Island Avenue, Route 1, straight out of the district and keep going for 2 miles, you're at our door, basically.
And you're still within the Beltway, right? You're still in the
another, I think, like 5-ish miles to the Beltway. Okay.
So for people that know the DC metro area, she's still within the Beltway, northeast of DC.
South of College Park.
What's that?
It's that Route 1 corridor, south of College Park.
South of College Park. So it's a cute little downtown area, little arts district in Hyattsville. She also wins the award for having the best bookstore name that we'd ever come across. What's the name of the bookstore in your location?
Yeah, I share my space with My Dead Aunt's Books.
My Dead Aunt's Books, top notch, and some good books too, and good prices. But I just love the name of that. And you share your space with a third, which did not get a lot of airtime in my video, so I do apologize. So who's the third space in your?
That's Tanglewood Works, and they mostly do handmade things, but a lot of it's from repurposed materials, painting vintage furniture and things like that. So there's still some tie-in.
Excellent. So I came across Holli, and we were talking about this as we were prepping to go on the air. I hate to say I found Holli, but I came across Holli for the first time in a podcast, not on YouTube, a podcast called Antiques Freaks. I've talked about it before. It's a podcast coming out of Boston from Ken and Dee. That they have been doing. I think Dee has been doing antiques for. I think it keeps 15 years, 16 years is what the number that has been bantered around by Dee. But they've got the knowledge of antiques. They've got a great rapport. It's absolutely hilarious, and they also do deep dives. And so, Holli, you've actually been on their channel now a couple of times, or on their podcast a couple of times. So you did a really cool one, I remember, on kind of like the ethics of thrifting. Yeah. I practically had to pull over to the side of the road. I was laughing so hard. And what other topics have you done with them?
I was on their vintage clothing episode, appropriately, because that's my job.
There you go.
Yeah.
And for the store, for those that would have the opportunity of visiting you at Suffragette City Vintage, can you kind of describe what you have in the store?
Yeah, so mostly vintage clothes, jewelry, accessories, mostly mid-20th century, so 1950s, 60s, 70s, starting to creep up into the 80s and 90s with clothes because people are asking for it, not really because I super want to, but it's fine. And then as far back as I can find, usually the oldest garments I'll have will be late Victorian, and I'll have a handful, not a ton. And then I have a fair bit of jewelry going back into late Victorian, and lots of early 20th century deco, teens, 20s, 30s, 40s jewelry.
Absolutely. And she had a beautiful jewelry collection. Katie commented that she had watched that video live and she enjoyed seeing all of that. I had a great brooch collection that we had Daniel was drooling over during the live. And also, for those who connect the dots, she is also the source of the deco beaded mesh purse that I sold during one of my live sales. That was very popular. So appreciative of that as well. So appreciate everyone that's joining us this evening. A couple quick hellos, but I want to make sure we get specifically to what Holli is going to be talking about. So thanks, Amelia, for Amelia coming in from Finland. So thanks so much for being a late nighter, or are we an early morninger? But anyway, thanks for coming in from Finland, Amelia. I hope you're going to enjoy this a little bit. One piece is at least from your neck of the woods, if I end up showing mine. We've got Brian coming in from the Chicagoland area. Katie coming in from Florida. We've got Tiger. Thanks for joining us, Tiger. And let's see, Peterson's in the house tonight. So thanks so much. And let's see, Kim's coming in from Buckeye State. See if we've got any fellow Terps. I don't know if we've got any of our Marylanders in the house yet. The Chicago, Jeannie from Chicago Lady. So thanks everyone for joining. I know there's a lot of other competition for what people can be seeing live. So I appreciate you coming in because it's always fun to have a live chat. But the idea of these is they stick around. And so hopefully if you like what you see, you'll be able to go back and watch it later. Or if you didn't catch it live, you're watching it now. And I appreciate you being here. So tonight's topic is souvenir jewelry. And admittedly, I wasn't sure what to expect. So I got a couple photographs and was very, very happy because I knew that what she was selling. But as a lot of us as resellers, it's hard for us. Usually we keep the best stuff for ourselves. So if you're already selling awesome stuff, whoa, what do you keep for yourself? And the topic we came up with was souvenir jewelry. So Holli's going to kick us off with my first question, because this time it's not even a planned question. It's just a valid one. What defines souvenir jewelry? So what exactly are we going to be covering tonight?
Souvenir jewelry is jewelry that you buy on vacation. So there you go. Thanks for having me.
I probably could have figured that one out. Okay. So for all the people that just turned our show off, if they're still here, so what are we going to be focusing on tonight?
So the two sort of easiest categories to break it down into are things that actually have the name or an image of the place that they were bought in, and things that are made out of a particular material or in a particular technique that's specific to the place where it was bought. That's probably the easiest way to split it up. And that covers a lot of ground and a huge span of time. Basically, the place to start, probably 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the city of Pompeii. Why, you ask?
Were there a lot of tourists in Pompeii?
Say again?
Were there a lot of tourists in Pompeii? Is that where?
Not then, but 1700 years later, when it was dug up, a lot of wealthy Northern Europeans decided that they wanted to go and see it, and started going on, the grand tour in the very early in the Regency period, basically Georgian, Britain, and so on. And we're going to Pompeii, and we're traveling around Italy and Southern Europe, looking at
help us anchor a little bit of time. We probably all have a general knowledge of Regency / Georgian period. What era or what years are we in?
So like 1800 to 1820 is roughly the Regency. 20s. I don't remember what year Queen Victoria took the throne, but like from 1800 to when Queen Victoria actually takes the throne is the period we're talking about.
Excellent.
So Italian craftsmen in these areas that were starting to get lots of English and Northern European tourists started making jewelry in a neoclassical style to sell to them, like you do. So the earliest souvenir jewelry that we're really covering is that stuff, the cameos, the micro mosaics, all of these things made in like a faux ancient Roman style. Actually, one thing that's cool, I wish I had an example, but lava cameos are a very specific thing from that place. Cameos, instead of carved out of shell or hard stone, out of pumice, because there's a lot of pumice because Mount Vesuvius is right there. So you see those fairly often in that era. I think they're cool looking, but they are a little more fragile than your standard. Nope, that's sideways. So that is quite a bit later. This is late 1890 probably. So later than I'm talking about, but
just to go back to one of the topics of what you had mentioned. I'm sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure to fix that. When you were saying that they were recreating, was the idea of recreating or creating those cameos in the Pompeii area for the 1800s tourists. Did Cameo, are they the ones that kind of reintroduced that art form? Like you said, it was ancient Roman. So did it exist all the way up till that time, or was that kind of reintroduced then?
It was repopularized, I think I would say, because there was this big neoclassical fad of, and I mean, fad is a little ungenerous, but it was the prevailing style, right? Everybody was walking around in white muslin column gowns and doing their hair like they just walked off a caryatid. And like that was the big fashion movement at the time was neoclassical. So of course they start reviving classical jewelry styles, and cameos were very big in actual ancient Rome. So excellent. Of course that would be a thing they would do. So yeah, generally speaking, most cameos are still made in Italy and sold, at least initially, as souvenirs to tourists from elsewhere.
Now, one of the things you mentioned was lava cameos, and I think I've heard of those, but like what you held from the 1890s, that was a shell one?
Yeah. I only have shell cameos with me right now.
What would a lava, like how would somebody know
like this one is very neoclassical looking.
That's also shell?
See, like that's the style. And this is an earlier one too. You can see how far the pin comes on this side. So that one is probably early Victorian, mid-Victorian. And it's a very neoclassical motif.
And that is also shell?
Your traditional lady with fancy hair. I'm bad at the configuration of this. There we go. Yeah, I got there eventually. I shouldn't do this with both hands. I should just do one at a time. But yeah, these are all later. These are all 20th century. Oh, your sound has cut out. I can't hear you at all.
Okay. Well, we'll just let you talk.
That is a problem on my end. On 1 second while I put on some headphones, because my speakers hate me.
Can other people hear me? Can other people hear me?
I can hear you now just fine. Sometimes my computer decides it doesn't make sound.
Okay, so the question I was asking before, the ones you were showing, those were shell. How would you know a lava cameo if you came across one?
So shell cameos are that pink and white color scheme because they're made out of a conch shell, which is pink and white. Lava cameos will be all one color. They won't have the layering that lets you do a light color over a dark color. And they're in shades of gray and tan and sometimes like a pinky gray. They're all one solid color.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't realize. So gray as well. Okay. Maybe I've seen them and didn't realize what they were. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
they're the colors that pumice comes in, basically.
Right. Sorry, didn't mean to do a rabbit hole so early, but that was interesting.
Well, good. Okay, so yeah, and then the other big thing with Italian souvenirs is micro mosaics, which I do have a couple of to show. These are both 20th century, probably. This one's probably 1950s or 60s. This one's a little older, 30s or 40s. The older they are, generally good rule of thumb, the smaller and finer the pieces. And again, they're still being made. They're still being sold. They've been pretty continuously sold as souvenirs from Italy since about 1800, which I think is neat.
Is that, so kind of going back, so micro mosaics, I'm assuming, did micro mosaic jewelry also exist in Roman times, or is
not really that I know of? But mosaics, like full size mosaics, are a thing you think of when you think of especially Pompeii with all the mosaic floors. So some very enterprising Italian glass artist was like, I could make a tiny version of this and sell it to tourists.
Wow. Okay, so in general, particularly anything that the people watching this would come across. I'm assuming I'm not having people from the Met watching my channel. You're going to primarily these are going to be 19th century at the earliest, or the ones you're showing you said were 20th century.
Yeah, you're most likely to find 20th century ones. Okay. I've had maybe one or two late Victorian ones, but the older ones are so fine and so detailed, they can get really expensive really fast.
All right, two questions that are coming up that are somewhat related. One, I wanted to bounce back because you had showed, and I apologize, it was one of the cameos was right as we were dealing with the sound issue. You mentioned that the one was a little bit older because the pins stuck significantly further out.
Yeah, see that?
Can you talk a little bit more about that from just the general concept of age?
It's a rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast, but when they do this, it usually means they're from mid-Victorian, so before 1870 probably. I can't be sure. This piece, this is a family piece. I got it from, this is my great aunt's, and I don't know exactly when she got it, but her grandfather, my great grandfather, was an antique dealer. So it was probably an antique when he bought it. So it's pretty old.
Excellent. And I think the other one you started addressing as we realized that our sound issue had a problem is Katie is asking the question is how can you tell that something is a 20th century micro mosaic compared to like a 19th century micro mosaic? It
really is how small and how fine the pieces are. And it's a sliding scale. The farther back you go, the smaller and finer they get. So one from around 1900 is going to be noticeably more detailed than one from 1950, and one from 1850 is going to be noticeably more detailed than one from 1900.
And can you show one again? Because how are
Sure.
Are the pieces of glass, how are they set?
They're just like, I think glue or resin or something is up in there. The other problem, of course, is that you will sometimes find ones that are missing pieces or broken. The longer they are knocking around in the world, the more chances there are for pieces to fall out. But the really old ones are made with pieces that are set really tightly together. So the craftsmanship is really good. So
and how does a missing piece affect the value in general? Let's start with the 20th century piece. How much? It
kind of tanks it because there's really no easy way to fix them. Getting replacement tesserae is almost impossible. If you have the piece that fell out, you can glue it back in. If you don't, you kind of have to live with it, and there's not a good solution.
All right. So first, let's go back to the term you just gave, a tesserae.
Yeah.
And that refers to what?
Each little tiny glass piece is a tessera.
Is an individual one's called a what?
Tessera, and then tesserae is plural.
All right, I'm flashing through my wrinkle in time. So okay, that's a
tesseract. You were close.
All right, so tessera, and then you said it tanks the value. Can you are a reseller, and obviously it's going to change piece by piece, but tanking worth half as much?
Like I don't really try to sell them because people don't seem to want to buy them if pieces are missing.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Sometimes if it's something with multiple, like I've bought bracelets that were made of like multiple links, and some of the links were missing pieces. I could take that apart and use the intact links to make like a pendant or something, and that would be fine. But once an individual piece of micro mosaic is missing pieces, it's really hard to convince someone to buy it. Basically.
We had a question coming in from the audience. Peterson is asking, and it's something that you hadn't really touched on. Do you find that the finer the craftsman, the smoother the top of the micro mosaics? So kind of, can you address one, like what is the typical smoothness, and then how does that vary either by age or by quality?
Again, yeah, that is a sign of craftsmanship. This one, I'll hold it up sideways and see, hold on, other hand and closer. You can kind of see it's got some unevenness to it.
Oh, interesting.
Some of the pieces are taller than others, and they don't sit like perfectly flush. This is the older one, and you can see that's actually it's more of a smooth dome. I'm trying to hold it against something dark so you can like see better. But do you see the difference?
Yeah, I could definitely see the difference.
Mm-hmm. And then the older ones are much better. Honestly, go on like Pinterest and look at Victorian micro mosaics because they're insane. The level of detail is bonkers. If you've ever seen one in a museum or at an antique show, they're gorgeous.
And Antiques from Karen Janet is talking about a book. Oh. And that was going to be one of the questions. Are you familiar with any books? She's referring to Cameos Old and New 4th edition.
No, I'm really bad about, like, I'll do the amount of internet research I need to know about a particular piece, and then I just have that information on file for later. I don't sit down and read a whole book about like a category of things all that often.
Okay. Excellent. Sorry, we've like so much of our time just now. We're in like one town, so
Italy was like a big, like Italy was sort of the genesis of all of this. And once people were traveling more through the rest of the 19th century, more and more places started going like, oh, we can sell jewelry to people. And other kinds of souvenirs, obviously, as well. But jewelry was a big one because it's small and it's portable and it's pretty. And then like we can skip, I think, to the next sort of big leap forward in souvenir technology, which is when rail travel in Britain made travel affordable for the middle class. And all of a sudden, if you were a middle class British person, you could travel and go on vacation and buy souvenirs and take them home. So that's when you start seeing more stuff like Scottish agate in brooches and stuff with the names of places in other parts of Britain and smaller and less sort of fancy places producing souvenirs. I don't have, I have a couple of examples for that. So this and this are both mid to late 19th century, late 19th century, let's say. It's got that Art Nouveau vibe. Sterling silver enameled brooches with coats of arms from the places that they were bought in, which I don't know what those are. I have not identified those coats of arms. I just liked them because they're pretty and one has snakes on.
I was just saying the House of Slytherins right there.
Hey, I'm a Hufflepuff.
Okay. So one of the questions, and it's just the way you said it made me think of this. So first of all, you said we've jumped forward a little bit in now the middle class being able to travel and also purchase antiques. So are we late Victorian? Where are we now?
That's mid to late Victorian, like up through the rest of the 19th century. That's the kind of stuff that you'll see more of. There's a lot in sterling silver, a lot of really pretty pieces. A lot of things that will have like engraving with the names of places or images of places. Some stuff just says the word souvenir on it, which is like, you got the spirit, I guess.
Okay. Now, would these, and I'm just trying to picture, and I guess some of it might be based on the size of the town or, what was famous there, but would they then have had kind of like one chain of souvenirs that were geared more for the wealthy, was there still the wealthy Victorians traveling and would want everything in gold, and then they would also then have the secondary, or did they kind of stop catering to the wealth and really went for more the volume?
I think wealthier people were probably still mostly getting, like they were mostly still traveling in fancier places. Like they weren't going to Blackpool, they weren't going to like seaside resorts in Britain, which is where a lot of the travel was in that era. So if they were also probably getting stuff custom made for themselves, and it doesn't really have the same look as a piece that was made to be sold in a shop to whoever could afford it as a tourist. And it's not as much my area of expertise. I will say I don't do a lot of really high-end stuff. Most of what I sell is like sterling silver or costume, so I don't see as much of it.
Okay, and that's interesting. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, okay. So yeah, once we get into the 20th century, you start seeing a lot more like just sort of costume souvenir jewelry. I've got some probably like 30s-ish. This is a souvenir bracelet from Paris. Lots of enameled stuff. Here's another enameled bracelet from, I'm going to say Norway, somewhere in Scandinavia, because it's got those little Viking guys, those little longboats. There's a longboat. So somewhere in Scandinavia is my guess. That's a unicorn. And you start, well, actually, this is a personal favorite of mine. This is turn of the century, and it says Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful little enameled sterling silver brooch. So that's a nicer one, but there's, something at every level. Like that's a high-end DC souvenir. And this is the Capitol building on mother of pearl in a locket, which would be like mid to low range more. And then this is just a little piece of cheapy stamped brass with a little bit of enamel to pick out the name of Washington, D.C. That's blurry. There we go. So there's sort of, there's levels, just like with all other jewelry. There's fancy and less fancy and not fancy at all. So you'll also see stuff like a lot of like Austrian and German and Swiss stuff. These are probably from the 50s. All of these guys that you'll see a lot of in this kind of general style where it's stamped, it's base metal, stamped out, and then enameled or painted with a place name written on it. I've got a whole bunch of these, actually. Here's another one. So that was a really common style. And then at the same time, you'd be seeing in plastic or celluloid these little guys, which were even more budget friendly, very lightweight. I enjoy them. The chippy paint is kind of charming on these little guys. Lots of deer for some reason.
You're kind of touching on one of the questions that I had on those before you showed the plastic, but maybe it's the same. Mm-hmm. Was there a trend, or was it happening that they would use kind of like a blank to create that flag or that ribbon area, and then like a company would sell it on to then other places to say, okay, now knock yourself out, put your
absolutely
tone down.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see something that you see a lot from like turn of the century through probably the 40s, 50s is painted mother of pearl pieces. So someone would take a little flat piece of mother of pearl, paint a little landscape on it, and then as the last step, put the name of the place. And a lot of them will say like Niagara Falls and things. I mean, that's been such a big tourist destination. There's tons of Niagara Falls souvenir, everything, everywhere. But you'll see them with the names of places where you're like, who was ever a tourist there? And it does have a certain like it's like watching a video of someone and then they dub over the place name with your hometown very crudely. It's that kind of vibe. So a lot of stuff was sort of, mass produced and then lightly customized as cheaply as possible for whatever location it ended up in.
Now, from a collectability standpoint, does that, I mean, that probably then would have been a less expensive item?
Yeah. But also like, there's kind of two directions you can go with it. Either if you want to say collect painted mother of pearl stuff from all over, you can do that. And a lot of them will be very similar to each other. Or you could say, okay, I want all the Niagara Falls souvenirs. And so you're getting all the different kinds and styles of souvenirs from one place, which is what I like to do with DC stuff. So I if I found a locket like this with the arch from St. Louis on it, I wouldn't buy that because it's not DC, even if it was the same locket with the same mother of pearl and a different little metal bit on the front.
Now, I know that what we're seeing is your personal collection, but because you do have a shop in DC, first, anything that makes it through your fingertips and goes into your shop, do you find, what's kind of the general rule of thumb? Like, can you sell something that has a St. Louis arch on it being in DC? Or will you get, because what I've found as a buyer / collector / reseller, sometimes I'll go into a place like, okay, I should be able to find all kinds of stuff because this is the area that it's known for. But then I find that it's also some of the most expensive stuff because people from that area are trying to collect it. But then sometimes I'll find that there's so much of it that it's cheaper because there's so much of it, they just run across it all the time. So like, what are you finding?
So for me, it's almost the opposite. I have a hard time finding DC souvenir stuff in the wild here because people bought it and went home from DC. They came here, they bought it, they left.
Oh, interesting.
So that's actually challenging. And actually, although I did use that St. Louis as an example for a reason, because I have this little guy. Charm bracelet charms are also a huge thing with souvenirs. People from, I don't know, the 50s were probably like peak charm bracelet, but they're still being made and collected and sold. Like this is my own personal charm bracelet. A lot of these are souvenir charms. Only some of them are from places I've actually been.
Fantastic. I wanted to have examples. I usually have examples when I have guests. I wanted to find my daughter's Disney charm bracelet. It wouldn't have been vintage because although she technically is now over 20 years old, so she could fall into that vintage category. But we got her a charm every time we went to Disney.
Yeah,
so she's been at Disney 3 times. So she's got 3 Disney charms. But she has it with her. I couldn't find it. I didn't have it here. So, so the charms, like you said, they were maybe the peak was 50s.
Mhm.
What point were they kind of introduced? Do you know, like just in a general, did they exist in the 19th century?
They did, and they were also quite big then, and then had another resurgence in the 50s. Actually, Antiques Freaks does an episode about this that is very good, and you should just listen to that because they know more about it than I do.
We've got a question that's coming in from Pandora's Box, and I want to extend it too. So she's saying she has a Washington, D.C. tie clip. So from a category standpoint, would that be considered a souvenir, or is it something like she's saying something a senator would wear, or like I just did a recent sale, I had, it was a quote unquote Ronald Reagan jelly bean jar. It had the presidential seal on it and had Ronald Reagan's name. So it didn't say DC. So at what point does something become like, hey, this was used on a congressman's desk, or that was something used in DC versus this is at the airport and you can purchase as a souvenir?
Yeah, the Ronald Reagan candy jar is probably more in the airport purchase category. The tie clip was probably sold as a souvenir. Senator, like actual people who are in Congress, are more likely to wear ties and lapel pins and tie clips and things with their own state logo or seal on it, or whatever like office they hold. Like I think I have a tie clip at the shop right now with the seal of the vice president's office on it, but it wouldn't say Washington, D.C. It says the vice president of the United States of America on it. So that's sort of the difference.
Okay. Yeah, because I've seen it. I've not seen jewelry, so the tie tag made me think of it. I've seen pieces that like from the desk of a senator, like a paperweight or something like that. Yeah,
you'll see like lapel pins, I think, are most common, but occasionally tie clips or cufflinks. I also, before we leave charms entirely, I had one other thing to show, because the other kind of charm bracelet that I find really charming is this kind, which is the kind where the name of the place is spelled out in letter charms. So this is from Ocean City, Maryland. Well, Virginia? It's like right on the line.
Yeah, it's Ocean City. I think it's Ocean City, Maryland.
And then, Dewey's in Delaware. It's that whole strip of beaches it crosses into all three. So I never remember which is which. I went there every summer as a child. I should know this. But yeah, so these are a thing that you'll see. I've seen them from Niagara Falls. There's Paris ones. Those can be valuable if they're on the older side. Sometimes you'll actually see them from like someone's high school. It'll say like the name of the school and then HS. So I just think that that's like a cute little subcategory of souvenir bracelets. Souvenirs.
Now, something like that, though, would that, like, say the C fell out of Ocean City, does that also then, like, this is now not useful in it? Like, is that, I guess, obviously they're charms, but I guess I would never have considered that necessarily a charm bracelet, because they can't be sold as individuals.
Yeah, no, it does have to be one whole piece, but it is a bracelet, and it is
and it has charms on it.
There's charms on it.
So then I know that we didn't really talk about it, but if people that watched the video, you do make jewelry from vintage pieces. So is that where some of those would go to?
If I had like a partial one, I actually a few years ago decided I wanted to make from scratch charm bracelets like that with the names of places, but only fictional places. So I made some that say Sunnydale HS, which is, of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer's high school. And I made some for Beach City, which is a fictionalized version of Ocean City from a cartoon. Because I'm ridiculous.
Excellent.
So that was fun. But then I ran out of fictional places that you would realistically have a souvenir from. Like, there aren't that many.
Now, you mentioned that one bracelet was your charm bracelet. So we've got a question coming in from Finland. Do you ever wear your souvenir jewelry, or do you just use it as a collection?
Oh, yeah, I wear them all the time. I wore that Ocean City bracelet within the last month or two. I wear the other two, the enamel souvenir bracelets, together all the time because they look really nice together. I don't keep jewelry that I don't intend to wear, generally speaking. The pieces that get worn more sparingly are this one, because it's literally a family heirloom. So, but Narnia, but like, who would buy souvenirs from Narnia? Like, they don't have like capitalism in Narnia. So I'm not sure how that would work, actually, but maybe.
That'd be awesome. And Peterson's loving the Buffy reference. So Oh, and we got the Gilmore Girls fan.
Yeah, or I guess you could do Riverdale, but I won't watch that show. So
Linda Punky is sharing that she has 200 key rings
Cool.
as souvenirs. Making a bell out of them.
not sure how that would work, but cool.
Yeah, so I guess that drifts a little bit out of jewelry, but yeah, I mean, I get the souvenir magnets, or I get stuff to go on my Christmas tree every time I go someplace new. So there's all different ways, and I technically have probably jewelry on my Christmas tree because try and travel someplace in June and find a Christmas ornament, it's hard. So
that's very fair.
Yeah, I know one of the ornaments on my tree is a handmade piece from I purchased at a little art market in Brazil. And every time I hang it on the tree, I'm like, yep, well, here's the cord that went with it, but I'm just hanging the charm.
That works. I had a couple other pieces I wanted to show you guys that are usually sold that like they don't obviously look like souvenirs, but they almost certainly would have been when they were first sold. So you know how to spot them in the wild. This is, I think, really cool. So this is, I would guess, from the 40s. Sterling silver, a glass cab with an image painted on the back in black, and that is set over a piece of blue morpho butterfly wing. That's what that iridescent blue glow is. And butterfly wing jewelry has a pretty long history. You see it in Victorian jewelry, but usually just the butterfly wing with flat glass over it, with no other additional details on top. These, with the painted sort of tropical scenes, are pretty much always things that people bought as souvenirs in the Caribbean or in South America and then brought home. So if you see that, now you know where it came from. So in a similar vein, these carved mother of pearl pieces, boy, that's just blowing out all the detail, huh? Is there a way to, yeah, there we go. So it's a palm tree and a guy riding a donkey, which means that somebody went on vacation in Central or South America and bought this and brought it home. This, again, carved mother of pearl, could also be from Central or South America. There's some more elaborate ones, usually called Stars of Jerusalem, that are sometimes souvenirs from the Middle East, from what was not yet Israel at the time. And did I have any other ones? Oh, these little guys are also frequently souvenirs, these little faux toile trays. And I'm totally blanking on where from, though, but like Europe, I think, maybe? I don't know.
So for some of those items, particularly the mother
wherever you get toile trays,
with the ones that were the mother of pearl ones, like, so those didn't say where they were from. So from a collectability standpoint, is it more valuable to have the versatility saying this could be from any country, or is there more desirability? Like you said, some people collect a certain area. From a value standpoint, if somebody's looking to buy to resell or start their own collection, where would those fall in value?
It honestly depends more on workmanship than anything else. That whether or not it's identifiably from a specific place, I think doesn't matter as much as how fine the workmanship is. I mean, you can see, like, this isn't like an incredibly well carved piece, but you can see it is nicer and a little more detailed and evenly carved than this little guy, who I think he's adorable, but he's a little cartoony. and some more detailed and more finely carved mother of pearl or carved bone pieces will be worth more, just sort of regardless of whether you can tell they're a souvenir or not, as a general rule.
One of the things that I didn't have a lot that I could show, but the one thing that I wanted to show is this is a piece that I picked up. This wouldn't necessarily fall vintage, because I think it's probably around 20 years old at this point. But this would fall into that category of it's not marked of where it's from, but anyone, and because it's silver, it could be anywhere. But the fact of the matter is, it is the emblem of the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. Now I know that because that's where I got it. But when you get into things like this, I guess it has its intrinsic value in the sense that, well, it's a pretty piece and there's workmanship to it or whatever. Does having, like, if I were to write a little note with this and say this came from Singapore, or you wrote, like, you bought that little donkey guy underneath the palm tree, and you say that came from Ecuador, does that increase the value at all if you can isolate it? Even though, like, I could say this came from the moon. Like, you know, I could make up whatever I want.
I think it depends on having a buyer who cares about that kind of thing, really. If you do, then yes. If you don't, then no.
Okay.
So this is one of the pieces that I forgot about. So I talked a little bit about souvenir jewelry from Central and South America. This is from Peru, and it says Peru on the back, and there's a llama on it, so you know it's from Peru. But a lot of like 1940s, 50s sterling silver jewelry, like all the like Margot de Taxco stuff, that kind of genre of sterling jewelry was mostly sold as souvenirs to American tourists. And you don't really think of it as souvenir jewelry, but at the time that's what it was. But yeah, once it's divorced from context by, you know, 3 or 4 removes, it doesn't really read that way to someone who's buying it now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I want to make sure we're keeping an eye on time. So we've got 20 minutes to the top of the hour, and I know we had a whole other category we were going to cover. So unless you've got something more to finish on the first part of your discussion.
No, I mean, I think I ended up talking about stuff with the names of places on it, like sort of folded in. We kind of did both.
Okay.
Inadvertently.
Nope, that's good.
So it's okay. Oh, and the one other piece that I have a couple of things that I haven't shown, but they're not, they mostly fall into previous categories. This is the only thing that I have that I actually bought as a souvenir at the time. It is not actually old. I did buy it at Colonial Williamsburg. So it is a reproduction piece from Colonial Williamsburg, but I like it very much. So yeah. But
and there's nothing wrong with that, because in some cases
souvenir here that was my souvenir.
They're using their colonial workmanship. You know, so sometimes
it's beautifully made.
And stuff there gets expensive. So
yeah, it was, especially because I bought it when I was like in my early 20s, and that was a lot of money to spend on a brooch at the time.
So we've got a question. You'd mentioned like the railroad eras. We've got a question coming in from Sam. So he's saying, do you ever find pieces from, you know, getting into the travel aspect of souvenirs, like specifically from the ships or from the railroads, covering the mode of transportation?
So there's this little guy. I haven't really seen stuff with the names of a specific like ocean liner or train or anything on it. I don't know if they were selling jewelry with the name of like the boat you're on in that way. I don't know enough about that era, I don't think. I have some other little enamel pieces that have more like niche, like the names of smaller places on them. If you can't read that, it says Seven Springs. Or like a lot of them are skiing related, actually. For some reason, I got a bunch of those at some point. But a lot of like individual resorts will often have their own souvenir jewelry with the name of the resort on it. But it's more common to just see the name of a place. And sometimes it's a place where you're like, who went here for fun? Which I actually enjoy.
One of the things you had said earlier, Sandra is bringing up the comment, and this is somewhat typical for just, I'm sure, for your clothing, for everything else. You know, condition is definitely going to be key, and something that's in perfect condition. It's going to sell for more if it's in perfect condition. It'll sell for less if it's damaged. Mm-hmm. Do you find, though, exceptions to that rule where either because of the scarcity or because of the age? Yeah. Is there some area that we could be looking for that we don't want to dismiss because there's damage, or we would dismiss because we think it's not perfect?
I mean, it really depends on your comfort level with damage. Like the enamel pins I showed earlier, this one does have some damage. You can see where there's enamel missing on one of the snakes. That doesn't bother me. I paid a price for it that I was completely happy with, given the condition, and I enjoy it and I wear it, and it's not a problem for me as the end user. If you're buying to resell, you should know that people are sometimes hesitant to buy a piece with visible damage unless they're me and they don't care. But I am in the minority, and I know that. But
even you probably paid less for that than you would have paid if it were not missing that enamel.
Yeah, but for me, that was also like great because it was a little bit of a budget stretch for me at the time, and I didn't mind at all.
Excellent. We've got a question coming in from Brian. He's saying, what's the most unusual piece you've seen, either seen or that you own?
I don't know. I've definitely seen some, like I was saying, the ones where you are baffled that anyone was ever a tourist there are fun for me, where it's like random small town in the absolute middle of nowhere that somehow had enough like landmarks to make tourists go there and buy things. My favorite souvenir item that I've ever sold full stop was not jewelry, it was a souvenir scarf, a big silk scarf for the state of Georgia. And it had a map of Georgia in the middle with lots of little landmarks pinned on it, little dots for all the different attractions. And then the four corners of the scarf were scenes of things to do in Georgia. And the things to do in Georgia that they decided on were like hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation, and college. The fourth corner was just all the colleges in Georgia, and then like 2 students carrying books and looking sharp. Which I guess they ran out of stuff. It was like, well, what are the activities we do in our state? Well, hunting, fishing, outdoor stuff, college.
Let's do some learning. All right. Now, Sandy's come in with an interesting question that initially I wasn't going to ask, but then I'm kind of like, well, it's about mourning jewelry.
I think mourning jewelry is really cool and interesting. It's not usually souvenir stuff. The only time
because sort of it is, because
well,
now you're like your souvenir, like, oh, I remember going to the funeral.
So that's kind of, but there is one place where it overlaps more, and that's Whitby jet. So jet jewelry, which was a mainstay of Victorian mourning culture, was primarily made in Whitby in England out of material called jet, and real Whitby jet was like harder to find than a lot of different kinds of imitation jet that were more readily available. So if you went to Whitby and you bought real Whitby jet jewelry, that was like a little bit of a status marker. And it wouldn't say Whitby on it. It would just be like you knew what it was, because it has a look and feel that is different from a lot of the imitators.
Okay, so that was exactly what my question would be. Would people know, not necessarily that you went to Whitby, but would people know that was Whitby jet? So it was just that high of a quality that people could recognize, like a Prada or something.
Yeah, it's not. So some of it's that, and again, the workmanship makes a difference. There's Whitby jet pieces that don't have incredibly good workmanship, and pieces that do. But it's because Whitby jet isn't super reflective. It's not like shiny, sparkly. And it's very lightweight. It has a particular look that really suited what the Victorians were trying to do with their like deep mourning like look. And then there were like I said, lots of imitators. Bog oak was commonly used because it has a similar look. Sometimes things like vulcanite rubber, French jet, which was glass basically. But a specific technique of glassworking that was meant to imitate real jet. So yeah, lots of imitators, but if you have the real thing, that was like a little bit better. Okay,
that's interesting. But it was available outside of Whitby, like.
Yeah, but that was where it was like made.
Okay, so that is an interesting crossover. Okay, so as you get to let's move away from the Whitby jet aspect of it, but the idea that an area would be known for a certain material. And I mentioned to Amelia that we had something that might, show up on her from her region. I have a piece of amber. The amber itself would be old, but the jewelry is not. This pendant's probably about 15 years old. When you get into material like that is known or available in multiple areas, but only in a handful of areas, does it make a difference where it comes from when you're talking about jewelry made from that material?
It affects rarity in some ways, but I talked about the lava cameos from the region around Mount Vesuvius. Scottish agate was a big thing in sort of the mid-Victorian era. Queen Victoria made Scotland cool, I guess. I don't know exactly how that worked, but brooches made of pieces of agate from Scotland became trendy for a while, and there's some beautiful pieces made of Scottish agate. There's now I'm blanking, but there's also like techniques. There's some filigree and enamel techniques. This is a little filigree brooch that's probably from Portugal or Spain, from like, I don't know, 30s, maybe somewhere around there. But that kind of filigree work, usually in coin silver with a gold wash, is very characteristic of like a specific place and time. And then things like Niello enamel on some kinds of jewelry are, again, you only really see them being made by craftsmen in some specific places. Or, you know, different kinds of painting techniques and just all the various techniques that there are. Some areas specialize, and people traveling to those areas take them home as souvenirs.
Okay, so one of the questions is coming in again from Sandra. So she's talking about when you're dealing, and you've mentioned a couple like the artists or the techniques they're using. Is it common in something of a souvenir type piece that they would be signed or have any sort of mark on them to know specifically where something came from, like the amber, like the agate, to be able to chase it down?
Higher end pieces would be hallmarked for the manufacturer, generally, not the specific craftsman, probably. You will sometimes see like signed pieces that are made by like a specific artisan. You'll see that in like the arts and crafts movement, sure, but those weren't souvenirs. Those were just like people who were working as artists and selling their jewelry, not necessarily to people on vacation. Like that, it's just like a slightly different thing. And a lot of the workshops that were making high-end stuff and hallmarking their jewelry with their own specific hallmarks weren't, again, necessarily catering to tourists. And the people that were like, again, it depends a lot on the materials and the workmanship and the quality of the things. The things in the like mid to low range are just not going to have that. Even if you know, I mean, this is very nice workmanship. It's beautifully made, but it's, like I said, sterling with a gold wash, and it's something that lots and lots and lots of similar things were being made at the time. So no, this craftsman didn't sign his work. He wasn't working in an environment where that was a thing.
Okay, I think the last question. Well, there'll be a couple things we'll talk about and wrap up, but the last question was a lot of what you've been showing. You did a couple of bracelets, but a lot of what you're showing is brooches. So the question first, hashtag bring back the brooch. Everyone loves that hashtag. But then the question ends up being, was there a reason for that? Was it just because brooches were more common, or is it easier? Was that a nice takeaway item?
I really like brooches.
Come across the most?
I really like brooches, and I specifically look for brooches, so there's a little bit of selection bias there. I don't see necklaces very often. Brooches, bracelets, charms, yes. Necklaces, very rarely do I see souvenirs. So that is
earrings,
one thing.
Hair pieces, hair like adornments, anything like that?
Not as much. It does seem like brooches and bracelets are the two most common things to have like the name of a place written on them. I'm not sure why. But that is what I tend to see. They exist, they're just not as common. And I don't know why that is.
And you probably covered it, but of the ones that you've showed us today, what would you say your favorite, the favorite pieces that you had on display today? My
personal favorite is probably either this guy with the snakes or the little DC flag. I also really love the cameos, but those are sentimental value too, because they're from my family.
Okay. Yeah.
But I love all
actually,
the
Brian just snuck in a quick question about just the difference, because I think it could be a good souvenir piece, is cufflinks. Do you come across souvenir cufflinks very often?
I do occasionally, but tie bars and lapel pins more commonly. I've seen a decent number of tie bars that have either like the little painted mother of pearl plaque or a pressed glass stone with a place on it or something along those lines, but not. Some of it is just from like a manufacturing. I can say words good from that standpoint. It's easier to make a lot of little painted mother of pearl plaques and a lot of pressed glass stones for a particular place, and then just pop them into whatever jewelry findings seem appropriate. And a lot of those would have been pre-made to size. Like if you have a specific size and shape of mother of pearl plaque, it's going into a base that was made to fit it from, companies that make a lot of them, but they only have so many types. And most of those are probably going to be brooches or maybe tie clips occasionally. There's a lot of like interchangeable stuff, a lot of like like a bow bar pin with a pendant or a locket hanging down that has the name of the place on it. So like my DC locket would have been hanging originally from a bar pin or a bow pin or something that says like mother in like cursive brass stamping. Because the people who sold them would have bought the lockets and then the piece to hang them from and could have put them together pretty easily.
Excellent. Okay, well, we're pretty much hitting right at the top of the hour. So the last thing I wanted to cover is, because I promised Book Bewitched that I would make sure we would talk about this. So if you can give us another wrap up of where you are available. There's been a couple of questions we're asking if you do anything online for those that cannot get to Hyattsville, and then probably just touch a little bit like this again for everyone. This was her personal collection, so nothing that she showed was on sale. For sale, but she does have a store. So if you could talk a little bit about what's currently in your store, what's available, would be available online.
Sure. So my store is Suffragette City Vintage, like the David Bowie song. We're in Hyattsville, Maryland at 5132 Baltimore Avenue. I'm on Etsy, but so I mentioned before that I make jewelry. Most of what's on my Etsy right now is my handmade stuff, and I'm gearing up for some events in the next couple of months.
That's your Instagram, correct?
Yeah.
The way you spell it out, it's just VTG is the end. Okay.
Yep. So and I actually, if you just go there, all my other stuff is linked. You can get to my personal Instagram, to my Etsy, to wherever else I am on the internet from there. That's probably easiest. But yeah, I am on Etsy in a limited capacity right now. I'm gonna try and get more stuff up there, but like I don't do it enough.
But you said a lot of what's on Etsy is really your handmade stuff. So this kind of thing wouldn't be if someone is interested, would you take photographs or call if they contact you at the store, would you take photographs of your inventory at the store? And
and if I post something to the shop Instagram or my personal Instagram and you want to call dibs, I'm always happy to ship stuff. I can just send an invoice and ship. And I did pull some stuff from the store for this. Most of what I showed you was my personal collection, but there were also a few things that I pulled from the shop.
Okay, that's good to know. So first come, first serve for that kind of stuff. So I just want to again thank you so much, Holli, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And this covered way more than I thought we would. And this was fascinating. So
when I opened with like in AD 79, like that's broad. Fair enough.
Yeah, this was good. We covered, and now it's going to be like it's just like a lot of the deep dives. Now people can go out. You gave us some good information, even if we don't want to buy it or resell it or collect it. You'll see a piece, and we're like, okay. Wait, Holli said something about this. What did she say? And this video will be out there for people to reference.
Yeah, and one thing that I personally really like about souvenir jewelry is the same thing I like about anything that's personalized, things with engravings or monograms. It's a story, right? You know that this exists because somebody went somewhere and did things there and brought it home again and kept it for a really long time because it meant something to them. And I think that's really cool.
That is true. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining into the chat. And we will have another deep dive. Will be at the end of next month, where we will be a little bit of a tangent to jewelry, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the souvenir because I actually happen to have one as a souvenir piece. We'll be covering swatch watches with Katie from Vintage and Vinyl. So that is scheduled for the end of July. So we'll be posting about that. But thanks so much for Holli for joining this deep dive. Thanks everyone for joining in and asking some great questions. And thanks for putting your trust in Trusty Huckster. Everybody have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.